All right, today we're talking about, is Google dead? We're going to be talking about the state of SEO, search engine optimization, in the age of AI. My guest today is Dave Burnett. I'll tell you more about him in a second, so stay tuned.
Welcome to the Smart Business Revolution podcast, where we feature top entrepreneurs, business leaders, and thought leaders and ask them how they built key relationships to get where they are today. Now, let's get started with the show.
All right, welcome everyone. John Corcoran here. I'm the host of the show, and if you have listened to this show before, every week we bring to you smart CEOs, founders, and entrepreneurs from all kinds of companies. We've had Netflix and Grubhub, and Redfin, Gusto, Kinko's, lots of great episodes. Check out the archives to learn all about it. And of course, this episode brought to you by Rise 25, where we help B2B businesses to get clients, referrals, and strategic partnerships with Done For You podcasts and content marketing. And if you want to learn more about what we do, you can go to our website, which is rise25.com, and even learn about our platform, Podcast Copilot, which is available, and lots of information on our site about that. All right. I'm so excited about today's guest. Dave Burnett is the CEO and founder of AOK Marketing.com. He's an online marketing and AI expert. He's mentored over 1,000 different businesses in their digital transitions. He's done training for the Canadian Marketing Association and has really deep expertise in search engine optimization. I listened to another podcast interview that he did with my buddy Nir Zavaro. It was over an hour long, and it was just dripping with so much great knowledge that I felt like I wanted to talk to him directly and have him on the podcast. And he's also started a number of different businesses, including Achievers.com, promotionalproducts.com. And Achievers.com was actually sold 10 years ago for $110 million. He's also written a couple of books as well. So we'll get into that. So Dave, such a pleasure to have you here today. And I always like to start by getting to know a little bit more about what people were like when they were younger, because I think that informs who we are today. And you got this story. You were 8 years old doing fundraising for a 10K run. You and your dad are going door to door raising money for this. And I've got a now 9-year-old who would easily make this mistake. But you thought all that money was going in your pockets, didn't you?
I absolutely did. Thanks so much for having me on the podcast, John. And so, yeah, it was quite the traumatic experience for me as a child. Some people have these entrepreneurial upbringings. I really didn't. And so I was all excited, going door to door, knocking on the door. And then my dad had to sit me down and just basically say, yeah, Dave, the money's not for you. But I was like, but I'm going to be running. How is this not for me? And so it was a really good early lesson to understand that there are other things out there worth doing that you're not going to get paid for. So
that's a tough lesson to learn at 8 years old. Yeah,
it was.
Yeah, I don't get it. I have to do the running. Why don't I get the money?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, hopefully you raised a lot of money for the cause. So you started this business while you're in college. You had 50 employees while you're in college, and I want to hear about what this business was, because I was in college once, and I like making money, and I also like drinking alcohol in college. And somehow you created a business with 50 employees that involved drinking alcohol, or at least giving out samples of alcohol while in college. That sounds amazing.
I couldn't have scripted anything better. So what we did was I actually worked in third year university, as you said, and I had 50 employees province-wide. We were working with clients like Bacardi and Labatt's and a few others. And what we would do is we would go into bars, and this is going to sound really bad, but I would literally buy the entire bar a round. We would supply the alcohol into the bar and then pay the bar to actually give the alcohol out because of the rules here in Ontario. I'm based out of Toronto. And because of that, I like to think I was popular in university, not just because I had a minivan full of
either
beer.
way, I mean, that must have made you the most popular guy in the bar. You walk into a bar and order a round for everyone? That's crazy.
It was literally, I would go, a few people would ask me, so Dave, where are you going? Because it was every Thursday, Friday, Saturday, we'd roll into the bars. But that was one side of the business. The other side of the business was kind of the Costco style sampling, where instead of giving out a free cracker or whatever it may be, we were actually giving out shots of alcohol. It might be a small glass of wine. It might have been a beer. But here in Ontario, there are liquor stores and beer stores. You can't, well, it's expanding now. You can get them at more places, but at the time, you can only get the alcohol in those places. So we were very controlled, very much so that you'd walk into the liquor store and be like, hey, would you like to try this new Bacardi, whatever? And people did. So
Wow. So you're customer was the Bacardi or the distributor or something like that who would hire you to do these things to put
Exactly.
these give out these samples.
Yeah.
And so this must have attracted the most responsible, upstanding of employee, and you had 50 of these across the province. How did
Yeah.
you supervise this and keep track of all this and make sure that they weren't just drinking the product?
Well, I have to also point out that this was in 97. I'm fully dating myself. So this is before texting, before, I mean,
Uh,
texting was there, but it was before all
like
of
phone
the
calls and
tools. Yeah,
email, maybe.
it was
Yeah.
literally phone
Yeah.
calls, maybe some emails. So
Yeah.
it was a little difficult to manage. The
Yeah.
worst part was because it was Thursday, Friday, Saturday, was actually getting people to show up for these sampling events, getting people to show up and run the events where you actually go into the bar and buy the bar a drink. No problem. Everybody
Yeah.
showed up for those. But getting people to give out free alcohol samples in the liquor stores across the province was a little more difficult. So, yeah, it wasn't the most upstanding people. It was anybody with a heartbeat who was in whatever small town may have been, because we're running all the events. So it was
Mm.
basically a 0 to 50 people all running events all at the same time. And of course, I get calls, and this person didn't show up, this person didn't show up. It was a bit of a nightmare. But once we got it going, got a good crew on board, then it worked out really well.
Okay, so this is so as we said, this is kind of like early internet era. How do you get interested in digital marketing? Where does that come in your story?
So that's a little bit later on. So after I sold that business to my partners, I got into the promotional products field. So, t-shirts, hats, pens, all that kind of stuff. And in that promotional products business is where me and my partners co-founded achievers.com. It was originally called I Love Rewards, but that was a rewards and incentive company that I exited back in 2002, but then sold later for a lot of money, as you mentioned earlier on. But back after I started the promotional products, my own promotional products business back in 2002, we were going along doing great. That was my EO qualifying company back in '06. So I've been in EO for a long time. For those who are listening, it's a great organization. But then the Great Recession happened, and I started losing $70,000 a month. And I couldn't keep doing that. That just really wasn't sustainable. So what I did was I realized, okay, I got to get good at online marketing. So I went out and I bought 3,000 URLs. I put up 500 websites.
3,000 URLs. So you don't do anything
3,000.
half-assed, do you?
No, no, I'm pretty much a go all in type of guy once I realized what I wanted to do.
Wow.
So
You
3,000
build
URLs,
out all these URLs, or they're just parked somewhere?
500, built out
You built
500.
out 500 of them because so
Yeah.
you're just like testing different stuff to see what attracts people. Okay.
So back then, exact match domain names were a big thing. So we own, for example, like promotional products Seattle.com or promotional
Mm.
products whatever.com. We now actually own promotionalproducts.com and promotionalproducts.ca. But back in the day, that was what we did. So we put up all these websites, all these different things, and became a really good lead gen source.
Mm.
And as a result of that being really good lead gen, people said, "Hey, I found you online. Can you do this for us?"
Mm.
So the SEO side of the business evolved out of that. And that really started in '09 or 2010-ish and then grew from there. We got into paid social, paid search, all that kind of stuff to help people drive leads.
So you've done a bit of all those different types of things now.
Yeah.
And so talk to me a little bit about the state of the SEO world today. We teased it a little bit by saying, is Google dead? What's your thought on that, just holistically? Google versus Gen AI, where do you land?
So I land in the fact that all this is, from my perspective, is fragmentation of search. So the overall total, if you took a look at Google and all the AI searches, is still growing, right? More and more people are doing that. So if you look at it holistically, it's still growing. It's just
Yeah,
where
I
people
saw some
spend their.
stat the other day that the Google searches went up 20% last year in 2024.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's still going up. The
Yeah.
What's changed is how people click or don't click. That's really what's changed because of the AI overviews that are happening and people using ChatGPT and others like Perplexity or Claude to be able to use as their primary search engine. So it's not that search is dead, but Google is certainly in trouble from some of the things that are happening. But it's really the evolution of search.
Mm.
Back in '04, '05, '06, as social media started to come along in the early 2010s, that was really one fragmentation of search, but it was the social network. But it grew on its own, and Google continued to grow through that. This is just from my perspective, another one of those.
Mm.
Similar things are happening. But
Yeah.
at the same time, because these are new platforms, because these are new things that you have to be found for, and the zero click attribution and all those big fancy terms that basically mean people aren't clicking on your link anymore, you have to adapt to the new reality.
So, what sorts of adaptations are you seeing companies take? One thing I've heard frequently is that the Gen AI, the LLMs are, they're trained on the same information that is across the web. So it is just as important today, if not more important, that you have a good web presence. In other words, what you did for SEO up until now is still just as important if you want to show up in the LLMs.
So, yes, I would agree with that in a general statement that it's one of the components that you need. Good SEO, depending how you look at SEO, is really one of the components. So, there's other components though. So, the easiest way I think of it or try to explain it is SEO was really all about website authority, getting your website to show higher in the rankings, get your little blue link higher up in the rankings. Optimizing for large language models like ChatGPT and others is really about entity optimization and entity authority. So, what do I mean by that? Basically, out on the internet, there's a lot of different places that mention your entity. Say your business, right? They mention your entity, they mention you. Things like PR that you have, maybe you got onto the New York Times or Huffington Post or something like that. They mention your entity. You may have a Wikipedia page that mentions or is about your entity. You may have a directory listings in local directories, Google My Business, Apple Play, Apple Maps, whatever. Those are all about your entity. They're not necessarily as much about your website. So your website with backlinks is one component, but you have these directory listings, you have PR, you have backlinking itself, you have Wikipedia and all the other directories, in addition to all the things that you were doing. So SEO is a traditional SEO is important, but it's only one component of what you need to do these days to be able to be found on AI.
So, in other words, PR firms must be thrilled because it's like, well, we're more relevant than ever. We need
They
to,
are.
well, you need to get your name in these publications.
They are, and it's really interesting. So there's a couple of things just going down the PR path for a moment. Say, for example, you did something noteworthy. That's one of the things you got to keep in mind. Doing something noteworthy that people would talk about, that would be worthy to show in a Huffington Post or a National Post or whatever. When you do something noteworthy, what happens is you get an article written about you. But the key here is which platforms in terms of what we call high crawl websites. So those are the New York Times and the Guardians of the world. Those high crawl websites, news websites, have, like every website should, what's called a robots.txt file associated with their website. This robots.txt file is instructions for the bots. So, okay, I think I need to back up a little bit, but basically, some news sites let ChatGPT scrape their site, some don't.
That's
And
a big issue right now with Cloudflare taking a strong position against scraping.
absolutely. So this is one of the key things. So I need to back up a little bit though, because to understand this fully, I should expand a little bit about how large language models learn, which is what you had talked about kind of in the initial part. So large language models are different from Google search. Large language models are trained like you're going to high school. They get trained up to a certain, so once you're a high school senior and then you graduate high school, you have a certain amount of knowledge. You know a certain amount of science, certain amount of math, certain amount of history, whatever. That is the same with these large language models. They know a certain amount up to a certain point, and there are cutoff dates, and these cutoff dates are public and they talk about them. The thing is, those cutoffs and that knowledge is really just to teach the models how to think and how to answer. So then they spend a bunch of months putting training in place. They call it model tuning. They're tuning the models to be nice, so that they don't tell you how to build a bomb, to do all these things to answer correctly and in helpful ways. So they spend months training, but that's all based on their data that got cut off. So they're a high school graduate knowledge is what they have. And then they put this layer over top that helps, and it's called retrieval augmented generation, or RAG. So they put you have your brain, they put a RAG over top of it. And basically that's what you're working with when you're in ChatGPT. Now, the retrieval augmented generation what that means is when you do a search on any of the AI platforms, it will actually go out, find some information, come back, use its knowledge to write an answer that you can understand. So this is how, even though it only has a high school level education, it can answer questions that are university, college level questions or about stuff it's never learned before because it knows how to talk. That's basically the way that it works. So when we're talking about when you talked about, being found on the internet and SEO being just as important, it is because there's two things. Number one is you want to be in their original database of knowledge, and then you want to be found for your more recent stuff because it's not learning anything new once it has a cutoff date.
Hmm.
So I hope that's a little bit helpful to help you understand how it works
Yeah.
and what it does.
And so then if it has a cutoff date, I mean, I know these cutoff dates are increasing that,
Yep.
they're as they're adding more information. I so maybe this was less of an issue, but I was going to ask if there's a cutoff date, then how do you try and feed, what's the point in SEO? What's the point in feeding more information? How do you get more information into those large language models if they have a cutoff date? But I guess it's kind of a new moot point because eventually, because they're always adding more information in.
Exactly. So, ChatGPT 3 may have been a high school graduate. ChatGPT 4 may have been a university or college graduate. ChatGPT 5 may be a master's level graduate. So they keep adding to their knowledge, as you said, and they keep getting larger knowledge bases. But there's two parts to it. So one is being found in the original fundamental model, and then the second part is being found in AI search, which is becoming more and more popular. So Perplexity, the AI overviews, those kinds of things. So it depends on what type of search is input as to whether or not the large language models just choose from their memory or they go out to the internet search and come back to you with an answer.
Yeah, it was interesting. I just yesterday was looking for a local window company. And
Yep.
so normally I would go to Google, but I've been doing everything in AI lately to kind of train myself to get used to using it. And so I said, oh, I'm going to check for like a local window company in my local area. And you could see in Perplexity the sources that it's drawing from, and it was Yelp and like all the usual local sources. And then it recommended like two or three of them, which I didn't cross check from Yelp, but I'm pretty sure it just picked like the top two or three results from Yelp.
100%. And
Yeah.
Yelp is a good example. Being found on Reddit is another good
Reddit.
example
Yeah.
because there's
Yeah.
a lot of these other, like this is about the entity authority, right? So the top
hmm
two or three results on Yelp probably had a decent number of reviews, probably had a good optimized profile and would show up. So showing up on these other platforms can now get surfaced. And if you're using Perplexity versus others, Perplexity is great, but they all have their own, challenges. And whether or not the model itself chooses to work from its memory or chooses to go out to the internet is really an interesting stage that we're in right now.
Yeah. It is it's interesting too because it's like it's almost like I imagine you've had some clients come to you or like said, "What are the hacks? What are the shortcuts? What can you do for me to
No, nobody
we're a
would ever
local
want
window company or
hacks.
whatever, so we can get to the top, right?" And it's like you have to be good at what you do. You have to get good reviews. Your customers have to like the work that you do. And if you do all of these things, you will show up in the Gen AI search engine. But it's not a very satisfying answer, but that sounds like that's the truth.
It's 100% the truth. Like marketing is great as long as you put it on the front end of a really good product, a really good service. We can expand any market, we can expand any product or service exponentially if it's really good until eventually it breaks, right? You can only grow so big and then different things happen. But there's no faster way to drive a company into the ground than have a crappy product or a crappy service and then market it. So
Right.
this is this is one of the things that you're absolutely right. So the fundamentals do matter, but it's your entity that matters. It's not, and an interesting thing is a way to look at your website, just to kind of shift people's perspective on things. A way to look at your website is as a source of truth in this new world. I mean, all kinds of truth, not truth, whatever may be. I'm not going to get involved in anything outside of the information you have on your website should be accurate. It should show your your name, address, phone number. It should show who your executive team is. It should show why you're in business and how long you've been in business and all these different types of things, like a real source of truth. Then what you need to do is you need to reference that point of truth or that subject matter truth place from all of the other places on the internet. So if there's a Yahoo listing, you make sure that it points back, make sure the Yahoo listing lines up with what it says on your website. All these different types of things. Your Wikipedia page lines up. Like these third party things need to really match up to be able to give you the entity authority. So Google and the AIs can trust what you say because there's so much misinformation out there that
Right.
really expertise, authority, and trust is what matters.
So I think what we're getting into a little bit is the importance of all the technical SEO, which needs to be properly formatted, properly set up. You can't have broken links on your website. And this is an area where I, until recently, really misunderstood the importance of it. And the analogy that I give is it's kind of like, there's two high school students who do an essay for their English class. And one is 7 pages long and it has run-on sentences. It has all the information in there, but it's not well organized. And then you have another high school student who writes a really well organized essay that has headlines, it has an outline, it's really well organized, and it's clear and concise and to the point. And Google has got so much competition for any particular search, depending on the category, of course. And so they could send those search results. They just want to send that traffic to the best result. And if they're going out there and they're crawling the web and they're looking at all these different websites, and if some of your competitors have a well organized outline basically where everything is technically correct versus you might have all that information in your website but it's not organized in the fashion that Google likes to see it, then they're going to send that traffic to someone else. I'm not sure if that analogy works, but that for me that seems to resonate for me the way that the importance of thinking about technical SEO and how your site is set up and organized.
Absolutely. And I agree with everything you said. Think about it like what's bold, what's bullet points, all those different things for the individual content pieces you've got. The way I think about it is there's multiple people or things that you need to optimize for on your website. You need to optimize your website for appearance so the people who are actually on it recognize what it's there for and are easily navigated. That's one audience. Second audience is Google search. So you need to be able to have all your information. This is called something called schema markup is one of the things. And basically that's telling the machine what entity you're related to. And there's a whole bunch of other things. And so making sure that your site is crawlable, well organized for sure. And then there's the AIs. So not only do you need to have your site user friendly and then easy to read by the machine, what does that content say? And think about how the AIs answer you. It's usually kind of a casual tone. It's in shorter snippets, unless you ask for something longer. So if your information on your site is in a format like that, like if you're in a highly technical field and you're talking about all these big long words that nobody understands except for you in the field, that isn't necessarily going to get surfaced as much as if somebody speaks to you in a normal voice or a normal language about what it is that you do. So there's a balance there. But when you think about how the AIs answer, how you structure your content on the page, as well as the technical stuff behind the scenes that then can be referenced to your entity's authority, it's really kind of you got to work together to please three masters when it comes to your website right now.
Wow, it's becoming more complex. Tell us about the story. This client that you worked with is a SaaS company. You helped this. It was a B2B SaaS company, which you helped to generate $1 billion in potential client business through their website. Tell us the story.
Yeah, so we were very fortunate to work with a company that was doing Google ads and LinkedIn ads. So it's a B2B company, so those were the two primary platforms, and we were working with them, and we got in a bunch of leads, and they're a really, really high ticket, very expensive service that's very highly specialized, and they basically serve governments and other large organizations like that. And we got in. 10 leads in this one particular period. It was a month. And we were kind of like, hey, how were the lead quality? Was everything good? We were looking in their HubSpot. Everything looked like it lined up. And we got a Slack message back that said, yeah, loving it. These last 10 leads were worth $1 billion in potential revenue. And
Amazing.
that was unsolicited. We did not know that was we could see in their HubSpot what deal values were there, but $1 billion that was a new record for us.
I mean, my reaction would be, we are not charging this client enough money.
No, no, absolutely. That was internal reaction. I was like, how much? Wait, a billion with a B? So yeah, no, it was very, very happy to have seen that.
That is crazy. And so break down for me, like what were some things that you did in order to produce that? Like what changes did you make?
So we did some account-based marketing campaigns. So
Okay.
really focusing on LinkedIn, really focusing on who the people were. These organizations were large enough that actually just the people who worked in the organization, we could target that one organization. So we targeted the entire organization, set up specific landing pages for that organization, specific messaging, and then, did a combination of things to get people to go to the website, to the landing pages, and then fill out a form for an inquiry, and then to the internal sales team at the client took over from there to get the appointments and eventually close the deals. So what ended up happening is we used remarketing as well. So basically that's when somebody comes to your website but doesn't fill out a form, we could then remarket to them, those ads that follow you all
Yeah.
around the internet.
Yeah.
And so we did that, and we actually ended up getting 3 of the 10 leads from a secondary remarketing ad as
Mhm.
opposed to the initial outreach or the initial marketing ads we were
Yeah.
using. So
By the way, so you mentioned like, building these dedicated landing pages and stuff like that. How are you using the AI tools in your workflow in order to speed things up, produce, these sorts of campaigns faster? Are you using any of the vibe coding tools like Cursor or Lovable? Are you, using the different LLMs for drafting copy faster? What are your thoughts on those?
absolutely. So I am not, I sound technical, but I'm not a programmer by trade. I'm a marketer, right? So how do I use these tools as a non-programmer? GPT-5 just came out. One of the things that you can do with GPT-5, so as an example, we dropped in a screenshot of a page and said, I want to adjust this page to be for this target company, this target audience, rewrite this page. And so it rewrote the page. And then I just typed in code this for me, and it coded it all in React and basically created a landing page. And I ran the code, and there was a landing page. I took a
Yep.
screenshot of the landing page and sent it to my designer and said, make this.
Mm,
So it was, it's really, it made things a lot faster from an iteration, like how doing different variations and things like that. So just literally being able to visually represent what I want, or even it gets close and you just kind of highlight something, be like, instead of this, do this here. But the feedback we've gotten from our design team and from our programmers is it makes their life so much easier too, because they don't have to try and figure out what I'm trying to say.
right.
You
With
know?
immediate or a bunch of different versions back and forth, like, oh, did you
Yeah.
want this to be this color or whatever? Like
Yeah.
you can do it on your own. Yeah.
Exactly. So I can
Yeah.
show it to them, be like, this exact thing, except make it green instead of blue, and match the client colors, and we're good to go. And then they show it. And so we're able just to iterate, like testing and making sure that the best options are always available is a big thing of what we do. So trying to optimize is huge for us.
Yeah, that is truly amazing. Any other things that we haven't covered as far as SEO and the age of Gen AI? Any other thoughts on that?
There's so many thoughts. The other thing that people don't really know how to do yet is to monitor any of the large language models to be able to track what's happening. So we're actually building a tool that by the time this goes live will be out of beta. It's called LLMtel. So that's LLMtel.com. And that's large language model intelligence. And what you can do with this is you can actually track the individual query. So search is a search query. So if you go to Google search and you type in something, that's a search query. But for AI, what it is a prompt and a prompt response. So you're able to track not only your entity's authority in LLMtel, but you're also able to track different prompts and the prompt responses. So if you say, for example, you were that local window company and you wanted to track how local window companies were doing, you could be a local window company. Where do I find the best windows in Toronto? best window installers in Toronto. You could then track that to see how it's changing over time as you do optimizations to see whether or not you're showing up in the AI searches. So that's the other key that we really need to figure out is, what moves the needle, because they're going to be changing the rules. So ongoing, what moves the needle? What gets us found today? Because if you're not in the base knowledge, like we talked about before, getting into the search results is key.
Yeah, that's great. Dave, this has been really fascinating. Really appreciate your time here today. Where can people go to learn more about you and AOK Marketing, promotionalproducts.com, any other places you want to point them to?
Yeah, just connect with me on LinkedIn. That's the easiest way. Go to promotionalproducts.com or aokmarketing.com and find me there. We're doing lots of fun and great stuff on those places, and try to keep up to date on the blogs and things with all the most relevant information. So yeah, if anybody'd like to, I'd love to be able to connect.
Cool. Thanks so much, Dave.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Smart Business Revolution podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.